moral philosophy, there have been two competing ideas, and these ideas compete even today. They are not settled. So on one side, you have somebody like David Hume claiming that all the morality is ultimately rooted in our emotions, in our sentiments. And on the other hand, you'll find rationalists who would say that through reason, through scientific inquiry, we can create morality. In other words, one side claims that you cannot derive is from an ought, and the other side claims that you can in fact derive is from an ought, that is, from the facts of the world, from scientific established facts. I can learn what I should do in my life, morally, I mean. So to give you an example, let's take an example of a tree. So right now our understanding is that when we cut a tree or cut a vegetable or a part of a tree, it doesn't really hurt a tree in the same way as it would hurt a human being or an animal. But let's say tomorrow we discover a scientific fact that it does hurt, in fact, to trees. So the question is, would that change our morality? So there will be two answers. One side would say that it will change our morality because now we have more facts, more understanding of nature. So probably people will not cut trees in the same way. And the other side will say, it will say two things in fact. The first thing it will say is that probably people would find different excuses, different explanations to justify their acts on trees now. And probably the more important point the other side would say is that where does this feeling of not hurting others, which in this case is a tree, coming from? It is coming from our sentimentality. So really, although we are saying on one side that through this new fact, our understanding of new morality is coming from, but in actuality, it's just our emotions once again. So I hope I've made it clear, and this is where Immanuel Kant comes in. He was an 18th century philosopher, and he spent a lot of time working on these questions, the moral questions, also on the metaphysical questions. And he was trying to work on this rationalism on the basis of reason and scientific inquiry. And the ultimate goal was to create a society, to create a new moral code through reason and without having to go towards religion. And since he was writing during the times of Enlightenment, by the way, if you do not know what is Enlightenment or what was this period, there's also an essay called What is Enlightenment, written by Immanuel Kant, and I think it would make an interesting read for you. So yes, since he was writing during that period, you would see that in his writings, he's moving away from the religious ideas towards more secular and the ideas based on reason. So let's get into some of the details of the morality that was proposed by Immanuel Kant. So one of the first things that we come across in his writings is his insistence on intentions. In his views, intentions matter, and they matter a lot. So for example, if I am a militant and I want to attack on a police station, and my intention is to kill all the policemen there, and let's say if I throw a bomb and nothing happens, so in Kant's view, I would still be morally wrong. And on the other hand, if the same policemen try to capture me or arrest me, and there is some kind of confrontation, and they're not trying to hit me through a bullet, or they're just trying to fire a bullet just to scare me, and in fact, something goes wrong and they shoot me by mistake, and I die. In that case, the intention was not there to kill me. So that policeman is not really morally wrong in Kant's view. So now let's move on to more interesting question. The question of how to create a moral framework, how to have moral values, especially in a secular setting, not based on any religion and purely on the basis of reason. So Kant proposes something called the categorical imperative. What it is, I'll explain with the help of an example. And I'll start with hypothetical imperatives. And these imperatives are something which tell you what to do to achieve a certain goal. For example, this idea you'll find in a lot of religions. So there will be certain religious ideas which will tell you to be kind to other people or donate certain amount of money if you want to go to heaven. So the end goal here is not to be kind, but to get to the heaven. This is hypothetical imperative. On the other hand, what Kant proposes is the categorical imperative. And he says, avoid the ifs and buts, avoid the precondition, just do something, just do it. So for example, if in certain cases people will tell you that if you don't want to go to prison, then don't steal or don't kill. But Kant would disagree and he would say, just don't steal or kill. So the idea here is that we need to treat people not some kind of end, not some kind of means to get certain ends, but ends in themselves. And similarly, if I'm doing charity, it shouldn't be because if I do charity, I would get to the heaven or somebody else will help you when I am in need. It's just that I treat that person as an end in themselves and I help them. That's all. And Kant stresses a lot on the idea of universalizing this morality. And he does that in order to work towards that moral framework or even a part of the legal philosophy. So the ideas of morally right or wrong questions, he goes to work on those ideas by asking this simple question, that what would happen if everybody followed that idea? For example, let's ask ourselves if stealing, on the question of stealing, whether that is morally right or wrong, what would happen if everybody went about stealing money from others' houses? Would it be feasible if we universalized this idea and everybody practiced it? Would it make the society better or worse? And that's where we get our answers. Similarly, you can try these tests on different things, whether we should tell a lie or tell the truth. So if everybody was telling the lies, what would happen? Would it make it better or worse? Or similarly, what would happen if everybody told the truth? So that's how he works on his moral philosophy. Also, on the question of morality and treating people not just as the means but ends in themselves. Some people have this concern that whether we like it or not, but we do treat people as means sometimes, because that is something how we function, how we live in this world. So take for example of doctors or a lawyer. You would visit a doctor, let's say if you are sick or you have certain health issues or any concerns. And in that case, one might say that you're using them to attain certain ends, and that person, that doctor in this case, is the means. But Immanuel Kant, he doesn't object to using people in this way. He's talking about the morality here. So if you take an example that if you're going to the doctor and you're lying about something, let's say you're lying about the fees and you're saying you don't have money or you'll pay next week, and you don't pay. And on the other hand, you go to the doctor if you don't have money, or let's say there is some financial issue, you explain it to your doctor and be truthful. So in such cases, he'll assess your morality, how you are treating people, whether as purely as means or purely as ends. Because in both these cases, you are using the doctor to achieve an end, but the difference is in first case when you're lying and cheating, then you're using the doctor purely and purely as means. Now, of course, if you start thinking about these ideas, there can be a lot of criticism or a lot of opposition to his moral framework, his specific ideas. For example, on the question of truth or lies, he's painting a very black and white picture of morality. And if we pursue that, we get into some troubles. So the usual example that you'll find everywhere is that about lying. Suppose there's a criminal in your house and he just wants to kill your family or kill your kids, and they're hiding in some place, and he asks you, where are they hiding? And in that situation, would you tell the truth or would you tell the lie? So that is one challenge. And on the other hand, in a similar situation, you'll have another challenge, which is of conflicting duties. Because in Kant's worldview, his philosophical ideas say that we should absolutely and rationally perform our duties. So in the example I just cited, one of your duties is to protect your kids, and the other duty is to tell the truth. And how do you make that choice? And more importantly, how do you make that choice purely on the basis of reason? Now, somebody like Sam Harris might argue here that we are trying to expand the maximum well-being, and we can have categories in such cases. For example, human life can be of utmost value, then we can have different gradations in that. And it doesn't have to be absolute to that extent, but still you can see the flaw and need for the exceptions, because otherwise you cannot have a comprehensive moral framework. Another important point about Kant's morality is that it kind of downplays our emotions and human feelings that we have. So let's consider an example. Let's say you are admitted in a hospital, you are the patient, And there are two visitors, probably friends or relatives. They visit you every day and they bring certain gifts, flowers for you. One of the visitors, she visits you out of sympathy, and it's purely an emotional feeling. She is very emotional about it and just wants you to get over to overcome this suffering, and she hopes that you get to a happier state. And this is purely an emotional motivation on part of her behavior. On the other hand, there's another visitor, another friend. She has a different reason to visit you. She's not very emotional about it, but she thinks it is her moral duty. And it is, in fact, she says or she thinks that she should behave in this way, not because she has any emotional outcry or any pain in her heart for your suffering, but just that this is the right thing to do for her. And before we analyze this situation, I would just like to point out that these two scenarios you can kind of see in the society being played out between the conservatives, traditional people, and in the recent modern romantics. Because if you see traditional people, probably our grandparents, they would insist on doing certain things, for example, visiting relatives, seeing other people, because it was the right thing to do. And more modern people, more romantics, they would say they would only visit a friend or a relative because they really wanted to. And if they didn't feel like it, if they didn't feel the need of seeing that person, didn't have that kind of sympathy or love or affection for that person, they won't visit. So these are the two kind of ideas. And often we don't see it in terms of morality, but it falls there considering what Immanuel Kant is talking about. So interestingly, Kant's explanation in this case goes against to our common sense. We would feel that the person who's going there out of sympathy and love and affection is doing the right thing, is doing the moral thing. But Kant doesn't believe that. In fact, I will quote him in this scenario. He says that there are persons so sympathetically constituted that without any motive of vanity or selfishness, they find an inner satisfaction in spreading joy and rejoice in the contentment of others, which they have made possible. But I say, however dutiful and amiable it may be, that kind of action has no true moral worth. So here we go. So if you visit your grandparents out of emotions, out of pure love, because it makes you happy, Kant doesn't think it's a moral thing to do. He's not saying it's immoral, but he's saying it's kind of amoral. That is, it's got nothing to do with morality in this case. But on the other hand, if you didn't feel like visiting your grandparents, and still out of pure reason you perform this duty, then you're doing a moral service. It sounds very counterintuitive, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of counter arguments to that. But it's an interesting thought how we see morality. And probably this is where his counterparts would disagree with him, that morality, they would say, is rooted in sentimentality, and he would say that no, it's not. It's purely based on reason. So on that note, I would finish this podcast, but I would suggest that if you can find time, please read his work Critique of Pure Reason. And if you can find more time, then you can also try Critique of Practical Reason. And if you still have some time left, I would say go for Critique of Judgment, because there you will find how his love for art and beauty comes out. So we know for sure that Kant was a very rational person, a complete rationalist, but he understands the value of emotions, beauty, and the pleasure that we derive from it. And in fact, even with religion, he doesn't say that it is completely useless or its entire framework is useless. He sees the benefits of religion and how to learn from religious framework and create this new secular framework of morality in that light. So I'll leave you at that, and about these philosophical questions, I'll keep coming back to that, and not just through other philosophers' ideas, but also revisit Kant's writings once again. All right then, I hope you'll have a really good time exploring this subject and read the books that I mentioned, and have a good time reading all these ideas. Good luck.